Some more thoughts on the attacks in France, and first of all, this video contains no graphic footage whatsoever, no violence, no blood. I say that because my first video on this subject was removed from YouTube and then only reinstated with an age restriction, despite the fact that it had no footage whatsoever of any violent action. But to start off with, obviously this is a video that a lot of people have been talking about, and Storm Clouds Gathering has done a good analysis. It shows the two terrorists involved in the Charlie Hebdo siege executing a police officer, the first on the scene, who of course was a Muslim himself, Ahmed Merabet. And as you can see from the footage, which I will not play, but you can see linked down in the bar below, they apparently wound him first, then walk up to him and shoot him in the head. The problem with this explanation, as a lot of people have pointed out, is that shooting somebody at point-blank range with an AK-47 in the head would produce at least some blood splatter, if not complete obliteration of the head. What we appear to see from this video is a gunshot that hits the pavement, bounces away, and doesn't actually go into the police officer's head. So people are legitimately asking questions as to why the mainstream media has widely reported the fact that this Muslim police officer was executed in this moment, having been shot in the head. When you watch the video, it appears as if the shot is fired a foot away from the officer into the pavement. Here you see the residue from the shot as it apparently hits the pavement. The officer shows no reaction to being shot in the head. There's no violent movement of the head backwards. So people are asking why the media is reporting that this officer was shot in the head when this video appears to suggest otherwise. Does this mean that the entire attack on Charlie Hebdo, as well as the attack on a Jewish grocery store, was staged, was a hoax, that nobody ever died in these attacks? No, you cannot extrapolate it out into a completely new narrative. We know detailed inside information from both incidents, from survivors of both incidents, who gave detailed and matching accounts of what happened. So to believe it was staged, you would not only have to believe that 16 people died, but also these other dozen or so or more survivors who were involved in the Jewish grocery incident have also manufactured the exact same narrative and are crisis actors. So it's difficult to weave that fabric, that wider narrative about the whole incident being staged. But this is a legitimate question. So firearms experts, ballistics experts, what does this suggest to you? Could the bullet have hit the pavement, come back and hit the officer in the head? Could he have been shot in the head at point-blank range with an AK-47 and there be no blood? I mean, I'm not a firearms expert, I'm not a ballistics expert, so the jury's out and I invite your comments. What's troubling to me is that this narrative is being circulated based on completely false premises by the conspiracy theorists who think the whole incident was staged. They actually created a fake BBC News website made to look exactly like the original BBC News website and passed off this article as an original BBC News article when it isn't. So the fact that they have to create a hoax to supposedly expose the hoax is very troubling indeed. Because this is a very well-written hoax article, but then you read it. For example, the general consensus among not just skeptics, but some major news agencies is that the entire event was a false flag attack perpetrated by the CIA. There are no major news agencies on the planet saying that. So not only is it a hoax to begin with by presenting this as an official BBC News article when it isn't, it's a spoof website, but now they're actually claiming that major news agencies are agreeing with them that the whole event was a false flag, when they're not. So why would you need to lie to create a bandwagon for this narrative if it's strong enough to stand up on its own? It's very troubling that the conspiracy theorists out there have to do this when the evidence should speak for itself. Although interesting questions have been raised by this footage and they need to be addressed. But from a wider perspective, the aftermath of the twin attacks in France have been coloured by rampant hypocrisy at every level. So, of course, yesterday we had world leaders marching to supposedly support freedom of expression, including French President Francois Hollande, and yet the first thing he did was to ban his main political rival, Marine Le Pen, from taking part in the rally. So he was marching for freedom of expression, yet banned the opposition member of a party who is likely to beat him in the next election from taking part. Again, the complete height of hypocrisy. Also taking part in the rally was British Prime Minister David Cameron, again marching against Islamic extremism, having for years armed and funded Islamic extremists in Syria, many of whom went on to join ISIS, the group who inspired the terrorists in France. And that policy is not going to change. Both Cameron and French President Hollande will continue to back the rebels in Syria, despite the fact that they've defected to Al-Qaeda groups and ISIS on a regular basis and took all the weapons with them. Also, Cameron, of course, backed the 2011 overthrow of Colonel Gaddafi in Libya, which was achieved by backing jihadist radicals. So it seems they're very keen to support extremist Islam when it targets governments that they wish to overthrow, and yet now we have them marching in Paris against Islamic extremism. Makes absolutely no sense because, again, it's complete hypocrisy. And again, what was this march all about? It was about the freedom to offend people and be politically incorrect under the banner of freedom of speech, which includes unpopular speech. But unfortunately in France, although that rule may apply to offending Muslims, it apparently doesn't apply to offending Jews. It's a complete double standard. So we had this Charlie Hebdo cartoonist, Maurice Siné, who was charged basically with a hate crime, inciting racial hatred, for writing a column in which he criticised the son of former President Sarkozy for converting to Judaism because he would get richer. So again, he was taken to trial, he was asked to apologise by Charlie Hebdo, and eventually he was fired from the magazine. So again, a complete double standard. If we have the right to offend Muslims and the right to attack Islamic extremism and be labelled politically incorrect for doing so, then we also have the right to make fun of Judaism, but apparently not in France. So it's a complete double standard. Because freedom of speech is about defending unpopular speech. That's what it's predicated on. That's the foundation of freedom of speech. Because if you don't have that, then anyone can dictate what's popular and unpopular and ban certain expressions, certain opinions and beliefs based on their own mindset. So it's about defending unpopular speech, which is why, again, there's a complete contradiction. In France, it's illegal to question the existence of crimes that fall in the category of crimes against humanity, punished by up to a year's imprisonment or a fine. So basically, it's illegal to question the Holocaust, the Armenian genocide, any category, any incident that falls into the category of crimes against humanity. Now, of course, I'm not a Holocaust denier. The vast majority of people watching this video aren't. But it's about having the right to voice opinions that are unpopular. If you destroy that, if you dismantle that very base foundation of freedom of speech, then it's nothing, again, but total hypocrisy. So in France, you can offend Muslims, you can criticize extremist Islam, but apparently you can't criticize Jews to a certain extent, and you can't question things like the Holocaust. So there is no real freedom of speech in France. So when all those people are marching for freedom of expression, the world leaders, most of them would support laws like this, which actually limit and restrict freedom of expression. And of course, what has the reaction been to this attack, in which the terrorists attacked our freedom? It's to restrict our freedom. Francois Hollande has ordered 10,000 troops to be deployed on the streets of France They're talking about more surveillance. They're talking about a French Patriot Act. So again, further restrictions on freedom in the name of defending freedom. Of course, that's why terrorists attack in the first place, is to change society by forcing governments to amend laws and create more controlling societies. So, under that foundation, the terrorists are indeed winning, and now we've got 10,000 troops deployed on the streets of France. France already had troops deployed in airports, even at the Louvre, if you visit, they've got armed troops. They've got armed troops everywhere. They failed to stop this attack. All the surveillance failed to stop this attack. And yet, what's the solution? More surveillance, more police state. So they're exploiting it under the banner of defending freedom of speech by killing freedom. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm Paul Joseph Watson reporting for Infowars.com.